Greetings, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. Today we're talking about the 6 key considerations to successfully communicate with your first line, and brought to you by LiveTiles and PAIT Group. Just a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be distributed at the end of this. So if you missed anything at the beginning, you'll have it. Also, we will have a little bit of time at the end for some question and answer. So if you've got any questions, please go ahead and put them into the GoToWebinar chat or Q&A session, and we'll make sure we attack as many as we can with whatever time we have left. Today, we'll be going through, as I mentioned, the 6 considerations. We'll do some Q&A and wrap up. But before we begin, I'm your host, John Wesley. I'm a Senior Solutions Specialist at LiveTiles, and I'm joined by Stephanie Donahue. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So I'm Stephanie Donahue with the PAIT Group, and we provide Office 365 consulting services to our customers, and we're helping people constantly move to the cloud. And I'm really excited to talk about first-line workers today. This is something that we're starting to see pop up more and more with our customers, and something we've been around for a while. So really excited to be here with all of you.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Stephanie. All right, so we'll jump right in, and obviously first line workers and being able to communicate with them is top of mind for a lot of customers, a lot of industries, anybody that, you know, especially in the world we live in today. Just being able to engage with critical communications out to your entire workforce is of critical importance. And you know, just by way of showing that, we've pulled a few stats from Gallup, you know, to really drive home the fact that when your workforce is highly engaged, your company succeeds, right? Typically, we see that Gallup sees an outperformance in 147% in earnings per share versus their peers, while poorly engaged organizations experience a tremendously higher turnover rate. And so obviously these stats alone kind of drive home the point that being able to engage, whether it's your corporate workforce or your first line, is of critical importance to the overall success of your company. And you know, in doing that, let's define the first line worker use case, right? And so when you look at the overall kind of definition, if you will, or what is first line, you know, you're talking about 80% of the global workforce, or close to 3 billion people, in industries ranging from agriculture, construction, healthcare, hospitality, you know, retail, transportation, manufacturing, oil and gas, all of these. Anybody that's basically in the field doing work, not sitting behind a computer every day, that they are the first line. They're the workers we interact with. They're the ones that need to be empowered with the information, because they're truly touching either the products or the people that drive your organization's success. And you know, what we've seen is organizations that come to the PAIT Group or come to LiveTiles for assistance are really looking for, how do we update our personnel, right? How do we get them access to information around HR, around benefits, just overall general company information, or ensuring that they've got policy and procedure information, compliance information, safety guidelines, videos, instructional information, or being aware of upcoming corporate events, right? The first line, if they're so critically important, we want to make sure they're not left out of the conversation around, hey, we've got a company town hall, we've got an upcoming local get-together event. You know, we want them to be engaged and feel like as critical a cog in the organizational machine as anybody else. And then finally, just really being able to help the organizations make that first line peer-to-peer knowledge sharing, whether it be through messaging, conferencing, file sharing, whatever the case may be, just really kind of honing in on that. And Stephanie, I know that you specifically have firsthand experience in the manufacturing industry. So would love to hear kind of the story that you have around this use case.
Yeah, and this initially came up for us a number of years ago. I think maybe 3 years ago was our first kind of experience in working with the Firstline. And you know, all of those things you just listed that we were just talking about, those are all things that sometimes corporate uses, right? Corporate has policies and procedures. Corporate might have training calendars, things like that. But what really hit home for me when you're dealing with a first-line worker, they're not corporate. They don't sit at a desk all day, and you really have to look at them. And you know, as we do our planning, we call them personas, but how does this person specifically on a manufacturing plant floor engage with those in a different way? They may be using mobile devices, but they're not going to use mobile devices in the same way that your CEO is or your executive team. They use mobile a very different way. And so we really had to dig into that next level and understand, like, how do we reach these people? We have the same devices and we have the same technology across Microsoft 365, but how do we implement this in a way that's usable for them? And in this specific scenario, we're working with a global company and they had manufacturing plants all over the world. But what they were really feeling is that they were very disconnected as they kind of came out of this. In this case, it was automotive industry. They were just starting to come out of that time frame where, you know, they kind of had it pretty hard for a while, and they didn't upgrade a lot of their systems, and so they were running on a lot of legacy equipment and a lot of legacy software, and they started upgrading corporate, and all of a sudden they were going, wow, we can communicate so much better and we can share all of the things that we're learning at a global level. But they were still feeling like that first line workforce was really disconnected. They weren't advancing at the same rate, they weren't communicating in the same way, and they were really having a lot of barriers to cross. One of those in particular that hit me really hard was the language barrier. You know, we've got plants in other countries, and you know, their corporate said, yes, English is our language that we're using across the organization at the corporate level, but that doesn't necessarily reach those end workers, those first line workforce people. So we had to really look at that as a thing that we needed to consider in order to reach those users. We also had folks that had a very strong lack of comfort with just using an intranet site. When we rolled out their first homepage for corporate on the desktop, we're like, oh, it just works like msn.com. You go out, you click on a link, you open the document, and you get to your article. And they were like, well, these people don't even have internet at home. They really need to, that they don't have that comfort level that the rest of us do, which is doing basic things like opening communications on a mobile device. So across the board, corporate was saying to us, help us improve global communications. What do we need to do in order to help get this information out to our workers so that they can advance at the same rate that corporate's advancing, that they can connect with each other? What do we do to help reach them? And so that was really the challenge that was put in front of us, to try and work with them and make that better.
Yeah, and Stephanie, I've spent the better part of 15 years in the automotive manufacturing sector, right? And the other thing that comes into play is organizations as well. They're very protective of their employees' time, and some of the unions make sure that they're protective of that time as well. And so, not having a good communication mechanism during those work hours, right? Because these employees will not be expected to access this information if it's work related outside of those working hours, right? Or cannot be
Yeah,
asked to use the technology if things like language barriers exist. So you've got to have a mechanism to overcome these things, which is really critical to making sure you're synergized with your first line.
absolutely.
And so, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? I remember 10 years ago, people had to get into the payroll system while they were online, and there was a series of about 20 kiosks throughout the manufacturing plant I was in, right? And so people would go and have their own login and use that computer, whether it be in the break room or something like that. Inefficient, right? So you really need that consumer grade mobile app, and not just in manufacturing, but other industries as well, right? So whether you're on a construction job site, a retail, like hospital, food and beverage, or any retail store, you got to have a mobile app, right? It's got to be something that's in your hand, the push notifications. We want a push mechanism, not a pull. Don't expect the employees to go, where's that OSHA training information that I heard something about? Um, got to be able to send the notification, and less is more, right? We're overwhelmed with complexity, so focus on simplicity. And we need to make sure that both your internal employees and your external subcontractors, whoever that may be, are treated with the same importance, right? That information needs to be on target, it needs to be relevant. Don't just assume that it's only your internal licensed employees that drive the business. A lot of the times it's your vendors, your suppliers, your subcontractors that are as critical as anybody else. And then being able to really spread the wealth when it comes to content creators, right? Being able to have champions, first line champions that can have a governed space to create content is an amazingly effective tool, right? So being able to have a channel where information can be published to notify individuals within the same kind of working mechanism that here's something that needs to be brought to your attention, and then finally being able to measure what's working and what's not and iteratively improve. So really it's harnessing those bullets and really driving them into the considerations that lead to what we would call successful communication with the first line. And the first one, maybe Stephanie, I'll allow you to draw off your experiences. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about the ability to easily create content.
Yeah, and this is the ability to create content really kind of held us back for a long time in SharePoint, I think, right? Because initially with our classic SharePoint sites, they were kind of clunky, and we had our corporate communications people telling us like, well, it's so hard and I can't do what I want to do, and I can't publish things in a way that, I feel like reaches people. Something as simple as embedding a video for a while was really hard. And so now, we're looking at all these modern websites and modern SharePoint, and having that ability to go in and just anybody who's part of that communications team being able to go in and share content, relevant content, quickly, easily, and also to really kind of use different forms of media, not just text, but being able to include audio or video for town halls, or what are the things that first line worker needs to see. And a lot of times they don't want to sit down and read something. Like, I don't know about you, John, but I will click on a video far more often than I will sit down to read a lengthy blog these days. So we kind of have to change up, how is it we're creating that content? How do we push it out quickly and easily in a way that people are actually going to care and pay attention? And so that ability to create content for those that are pushing the communications, it's critical. It's a key component to being able to do this.
Yeah, I think technology has created a society of where, it used to be a few people were diagnosed with like ADD, and now we all have it, right? We It needs to be short, sweet, to the point. I don't have time to read. I got enough stuff going on. And I think part of what you said that's so interesting is I think about my own experience in day to day, just sending like text messages amongst friends or family. Like even being able to just copy and paste that YouTube URL into whatever app I'm using, and it kind of give a little banner image, it's just not a raw link. That's kind of the idea, right? And so whether it be through a modern SharePoint page or other even like Teams, the Teams interface, right? You drop that URL in there, it kind of creates this beautiful banner of a little synopsis about the video. And there are other solutions that do the same thing. It just kind of drives home the fact that I need to literally be able to copy a link, paste it, and all the formatting and the imagery is kind of brought in. And whether that be an audio clip, a YouTube or a Vimeo link, it really needs to be very simple but very effective way to communicate. So
And
that's
I think you bring a good point there with the pictures too. Being able to bring a picture into a post draws your attention to it. It helps you understand what that post is about. So you don't even, if you're glancing through a bunch of posts, you're not necessarily going to read the text. But if the image catches your eye, you're more likely to click on it. And so the fact that a lot of these things, when you post that link, it's bringing in those preview images, I think is super important. And makes it easy for the people posting, and it makes it easy for those that are reading to understand, you know, am I interested in this? Is this something I really want to spend my precious time to click on?
absolutely. And that kind of goes to the second item, which I'll talk to a little bit, is with that imagery, you also need to be able to target the information, have the appropriate alerts, right? Is it kind of as playing off the ADD idea is with our technology, with whether it be our laptops, our desktops, or our phones, we have so many different alerts coming in all the time, right? So email kind of, it's just there to see, is there anything I need to be aware of? But a lot of the times it's muddled. There's a lot of stuff in there. And so being able to determine what information needs to go to which people is of critical importance. So, you know, going back to your use case of the first line in manufacturing is they don't need to know if they're in a, you know, manufacturing plant in Lansing, Michigan, that there's cake in the corporate break room. And so a company-wide email goes out. That's just noise. And it
It's
can
a
even,
morale thing too,
yeah, it
right?
can,
It's like
right?
jeans day. Oh, we all get to wear jeans at corporate on Friday. Well, I wear my plant floor uniform every day, and I don't want to know about jeans day. That was an issue with the group we worked with. It's definitely morale as well.
Yeah. So being able to target and say, you know what, let's make sure that the right people get the right announcements. And then having some user setup availability to then, once I'm part of a group or a channel, to be able to, much like we do on our cell phones today, is determine which notifications do I want to get. And so that way, not only are the push notifications coming through, but I've determined that when they come through, there's something I've wanted to see. There's something that is urgent, that I think is urgent. So now you're playing into the user's determination of, I've determined this is urgent. So when I see it come through, I am going to click on it. That's the whole reason I set it up. But at the same time, having a layer of governance over it so that if corporate does need to get something important out, being able to ensure you're alerted that there's a confirmation required, such as, well, you know, there's been a mandatory update to job site safety policy, right? And I hate harping on it because we're all sick of it, but everybody's got job site COVID policies and procedures, right? Certain are more strict than, some are more strict than others. So just being able to say, hey, our local government has relaxed some of them, so we don't necessarily need to do certain things, or now we're allowed to let more people in. And then finally, you know, using the Microsoft technology that's out there to be able to do 100% automated machine translation, so that a post that goes out in English will be automatically translated to 40 to 50 different languages. So now that language barrier can be easily removed.
Yeah, and one quick note on that too. I think it's important to distinguish, when you should use machine translation versus when you should really have someone have some oversight on it. Because that was something of a really big conversation that we had in rolling out global communications was, hey, the CEO is pushing out this announcement. It's super critical that this is not misunderstood. And in those scenarios, they would make sure those formal announcements were not machine translated. Well, they might have started that way, but they had someone kind of proof it and make sure that it was cleaned up. I know machine translation has come a long way in the past few years, but I know definitely, when we first started this with them, that was something that was a hard and fast rule. Exec announcements do not go through the machine translation.
Yeah, but even if they do, and somebody's got to proof it, that's a lot different than asking them to rewrite it 100% from scratch, right? If
Yeah.
it's the old 80-20 rule, right? So if it's 80% translated, then that's hopefully a lot less work. And that kind of speaks to the policies and procedures, right? Is so the machine
Similar challenges here too, right? I think we talked a lot about not just policies and procedures, but work instructions and kind of the importance of having some of those translated and being able to find appropriate translations for those. But we did actually with this particular global manufacturing firm, we actually rolled their policies and procedures first at the global level and then circled back for communications. So if that tells you how critically important their policies and work instructions were, they rolled that first, which actually ended up being a really big success for them, to have a centralized location for all of their global policies. And in their case, we rolled out a way to search kind of like Amazon and to be able to filter based on language, based on the department, based on, is it a form or a policy, that sort of thing. But yeah, policies and procedures, huge, especially if you're dealing with things like ISO compliance and what happens when we need to print this and we hang it up somewhere and there's a new version, making sure that that gets reprinted, like having a digital workplace and having devices now kind of take you out of that, having to worry about which version is posted. We can just pull it up on the device and make sure we've got what is our most recent version.
Yeah, and I think it's another important delineation in there too, is that your comms are kind of always fresh. They're always new. People need to be aware of what's happening today. Whereas, policies and procedures kind of fall into that bucket of, like you mentioned, they don't change that often. There's a logical structure, if you will, whether it's employee policies or a set of compliance policies or safety videos. Being able to have a structure that people can access quite easily and quite frequently. And while at the same time being able to notify that there's been an update, that it needs to be reviewed, that it needs kind of sign off. Very, very important. And then obviously a lot of the things we talked about fall into place as well. Rich media support, right? So do you really want to read a giant expense policy, or would you rather have some bullet points with a video of maybe your head of HR explaining it, right? So being able to embed that in, spend a little time on your cell phone, watch the video, you're not inundated with a huge pile of text that you have to read through and sign off on. So
Nobody likes to read through policies.
no, I'd rather sit through somebody telling me what the policy is and then asking me if I understand. So,
yeah.
And then one other thing that's obviously critical is, being able to allow that peer-to-peer socialization within the context of a communication channel. Right? So being able to have social experiences to make people more aware of what's going on. So I don't know if you've got any
Yeah, so I have a really interesting example on this one, and you know, as we were kind of starting to roll things out for this manufacturing firm, you know, there was some debate over like, do we need this like social piece? Are they really going to talk to each other? Like that sort of thing. And what we came across actually during that time period was a case study, and it just so happened to be someone that they modeled themselves after. So it was like their gold standard. That's what they were working for. They read through this case study, and the case study talked about how they were using video, you know, it's now stream in the 365 world, but they were having all these quality issues, and they were really struggling to work at a global level because they would have the issue in one place and fix it, and then they would have the issue in another place and not even know that the other location had already gone through it. They had fixed it. They had a solution. They're kind of recreating the wheel every time. And what this case study talked about was how they went through and posted their videos into the chat platform, and then they could at a global level collaborate around what was going on, talk about a possible solution. And in that scenario, they would have people go, oh hey, we had that problem here, you know, we wrote up a, you know, a lessons learned, and here's some information on it. So they were, number one, they were communicating globally about quality issues, which is, if you know about manufacturing, like quality's a number one. That's where the big bucks are. If you can save money on quality issues, you're doing good. And so that was huge for them. It's like the light bulb went off. Oh my gosh, we have to do what they're doing in this case study. And things really took off from there as soon as they understood the power of what it was to talk to each other about those quality issues. And secondly, they were now building a knowledge base online because they had digital documentation. You know, we've got all these people now that are getting older and they're retiring, and all of that knowledge is leaving the workforce. Now you've got this digital representation of what we've gone through, how we fixed the issue, and some documentation around it, which was just groundbreaking for them. This was a huge deal. They went off and they did this and they implemented, you know, doing the videos, having the conversations, and it was, you know, it was fantastic for them. It was bringing them to the next level.
Yeah, and I think the most important aspect is really being able to create a culture of bottom up communication, right? So just springboarding off the manufacturing use case is, you know, think about an experience where somebody can pull out their device and provide real time insight into something that's happening on a plant floor. Somebody that's actually using the tooling or whatever to provide information back up to maybe the engineers, right? Or the purchasing department, or something about some component, some material, something that maybe isn't working right. Typically, you would have to wait, but being able to have a bottom up workflow of, hey, this yada, yada, yada isn't working so well, or maybe if we did this, and promoting that idea of idea sharing from bottom up as opposed to waiting for stuff to come top down is incredible. And if you could basically draw a horizontal, so whether it be retail, this item has been sitting on the shelf for X days, and I think I know why, because it's priced with an extra one in front, right? Whatever the case may be, just being able to share. I actually have a funny story around this too. We were doing an implementation for a construction um, company, and they use the messaging and socialization to let other first line workers know when maybe they've parked wrong by actually taking a picture of their car saying you're blocking a shipment from the loading dock, and being able to provide real-time kind of socialization and messaging to one another. So now they didn't have to go hunt the job site or, you know, make a loudspeaker call. They could just take a picture and say, is this your car? It's about to get towed unless you get out of the way. My presentation isn't moving. And you know, a little change of topic here, but obviously a very critical element is the events, right? And this really speaks to the morale aspect, is being able to connect your first line workers to upcoming events, let them know that, your site is having a get together, that there is a corporate town hall. Typically, at least in my experience, it's one of the bigger complaints is that people don't really get notified that there's a company-wide meeting that's happening that they're interested in attending. And just the fact that outside of maybe a big poster in the break room, they're unaware. And so if they're unaware, they feel like they're not included. If they feel like they're not included, then morale slips. So being able to just track what's happening, who's attending, integrate it with things like Microsoft Teams, and then even gathering feedback, very critical, very essential.
And making those recordings easy to find as well. Something we kind of fell into was the fact that, you know, it's a plant and some of them are 24/7, and even if the announcement does get out, there is a section of people that probably still have to work has to be done even though this town hall is going on, making it easy and accessible for them to be able to watch the recording afterwards, and potentially even be able to engage and provide feedback through commenting or things like that, is really important, so that even if they have to work during that time period, they still feel like they can go through, see everything in its entirety, and still have the opportunity to give feedback, which is super important.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And then lastly, kind of as far as experience goes, right, is whether you're Firstline, corporate, wherever you live in the organization, you got experts all over the place. And so being able to quickly find who the expert is, or maybe even more importantly, being able to use technology to update directory information saying, I'm an expert in this. I have a certificate that makes me an expert in that. And then being able to track that and quickly search off that to be able to find, I need a person A in location B that's an expert in X, becomes of paramount importance. Don't know if
I'm on
you
a
can.
mission to get rid of the Excel spreadsheet. I still feel like those are floating around where people have contact information or, you know, basic information about people, and they have them on these Excel spreadsheets and they're printing them out and they're hanging them at their desk, and they're literally out of date the second they print it. Somebody else needs to be added or something else is in there. So being able to have some kind of system to go research and have, again, that real-time data on who can I reach, what is their contact info, and not just a phone number, but you probably have multiple ways to reach them. Can you email, you know, what's their email address? Can I send them a chat message? And then presence information too. Are they available if I send them a chat message? And having an idea of, before I even send it, if they're in the office or not, or if they're, you know, active or not, being able to have that kind of immediate feedback so that I could go to somebody else if that person's not available, but someone else is. Having all that real-time data really expedites the ability for me to find someone, find them quickly, and to get quick answers back.
Yeah, and you know, the other aspect of this is in some of the industry verticals we mentioned at the beginning, you're going to have a higher rate of turnover Firstline than in others. And when one of those experts is no longer with the organization, you know, that's more than just your spreadsheet being out of date or needing to be updated. It can create kind of a critical outage in some aspects, right? If you were reliant on that person and you're afraid that all that knowledge went with them, what are you going to do now? Who do I call? Who's who? Who's who in the zoo, right? Who do I go to now? And so being able to quickly query, you know, a directory for, this was my expert in this at this location, and therefore I had my little document, but maybe there's a location 3 miles down the road that has the same expert, right? Or maybe halfway around the world is the only other one. But just being able to find that, but not just find that, when that new expert is hired or becomes available, allowing them to quickly update their information without having to go through an IT ticket and update Active Directory and yada, yada, yada. Um, in the world of first line workers where turnover can be a bit higher than other or areas, becomes of paramount importance in some cases.
Yeah, and what we were seeing actually was the opposite. And one of the organizations we worked with, they had this like tremendous retention. People that have been with the company like their whole career. And for them, it was devastating to have someone retire because all of that information walked out the door. And this was a huge piece of it. Well, who knows this or who can do that? And this person just, knows everything, and the second they retire, all of that's gone. So yeah, I mean, it's from one angle or the other, super important to be able to have that accessible and to be able to pull that up.
Yeah. So at this point, Steph and I, we're going to talk a little bit about what approaches can you take to really take these 6 items for successful interactions with Firstline and bring the solution to work. And really, we look at this in 2 different ways. There are organizations that are fully committed to all of their workers, whether it be Firstline or corporate, being engaged on the Microsoft 365 platform. And then there are other organizations that don't license their Firstline. They use third-party solutions because it just, to be blunt, it gets too expensive to have a M365 license for every single employee in their organization. So first, I'll ask Stephanie to maybe talk us through ways this can be implemented for 365 organizations.
Sure. So these examples are all just out of the box Microsoft 365. So the one all the way to the left, that's just a quick mobile screen grab that I took from one of our customer sites as we were building it. And so you can see very nice modern mobile friendly layout for communications now. This is super easy to do, 100% out of the box, no customizations. So right now, I think targeting is still rolling out. So that's something to keep in mind with the out of the box stuff, is that you may need to keep an eye on where you're at in that cycle. So you can do a little bit of targeting. It may not be as detailed as you're looking for. So that's one thing about the out of the box to keep in mind. But it is a really nice layout. It's super simple. And you have the ability then as just a normal user to go in, add a really nice graphic, add the communications in there, push it out. And the SharePoint mobile app actually will send you push notifications. There's some features in there for that. So super simple, really easy, straightforward way to push communications out. The second one in the middle, if you could just hit the first enter to go. I'm added a little extra thing to kind of highlight some of this. Thank you. So you'll notice I had some examples. There's a couple more in there too. So things like safety data sheets, workday, training, those are all things that we often see. These are just quick links. So there are some web parts there that thinking about things that are not just news or communications, but you can also link out to other third-party tools as well from that and use that as kind of that concept of having an employee app, I know, is kind of coming up. So, what are the key things that I need to access throughout my day as a first line worker? Those are things now, not just communications that we're talking about, but how do I access the tools and the resources to do my job? And a quick and easy way to do that here through the quick links. And then the ticket on the right-hand side, I threw that in here because something that we're starting to see pop up is that ability to kind of easily create forms and have workflows behind them. You can do this on the Power Platform, again, totally out of the box in 365, where you can do something like submit a quality issue ticket and have that go in. And we were doing auditing for the manufacturing group. So they would have a mobile audit form, they'd submit it in, it'd go into a SharePoint list, and then they'd use Power BI to do real-time reporting on their audits. And that's a process that used to take them quite a while. So that data took so long to kind of be pushed into corporate and to be able to understand what's going on in their plant floors. So we're not just seeing out of the box solutions for basic communications, but we're also starting to see some opportunities there to use the Power Platform and to generate some additional apps that allow us to work more efficiently, and for the first line worker to be able to push information back to corporate or to their managers, for example, to be able to have real-time dashboards. So those are some of the things we're starting to see. It's just kind of that first initial rollout, something super simple that you can do out of the box in 365.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen as well, just adding on is obviously with the explosion of Teams, a lot of this capability either being translated into the concept of Teams, and things like safety incident form being embedded within the construct of a specific, say, first line team. Couple different industries I've seen that in: retail, construction, and oil and gas, right? So when they're on the field, something happens, just being able to quickly populate that information, but you're still doing it within the construct of your M365 environment. So whether that form is writing to like a SharePoint list, right? Being able to use all of the out of the box capabilities to quickly engage and not go fill out a paper form that somebody got hurt, but literally capture that data in real time. And then, I love the Power Platform. I use it all the time to do workflow stuff. And so being able to like feed that information to HR to, make sure that the right benefits are in place, whatever the case may be, just incredibly powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Now, on the LiveTiles side, we have a platform that's really designed to help out those organizations that need to extend beyond their 365 users. So, not reliant on an E3 or an F1 license to be able to, pardon the pun, reach employees with our LiveTiles Reach solution. So what this is this is a evergreen SaaS platform that allows targeted communications. I'm actually going to jump back a little bit as I talk through it. You can see, you probably noticed a few screenshots of it throughout the webinar, but this is really designed to give that targeted information, whether that be news posts with great graphical banner elements that can be fully integrated into Teams, so that both your corporate licensed users as well as your first line unlicensed users can have a similar, if not the same, experience. With the Azure B2C connector, you can actually allow for self-registration of external employees through their email. And then being able to deliver things like structured pages or news posts or social socialization and messaging through the post portion and delivering events. The idea is that with the SaaS model that's completely powered on Microsoft Azure, we could have a first line communication solution up and running in as little as a day, under a day. And because it's an evergreen product, you're looking at something that doesn't need to be built out, is very low cost, and is constantly being upgraded in lockstep with where Microsoft is going on their roadmap, whether that be with Teams, with SharePoint, or with the Reach platform. It is built on Microsoft, so we're able to basically connect the dots between the internal, maybe SharePoint-based comms, all the way down to the first line. So that is, from the LiveTiles side, what we're able to do. And now I will open it up for any questions we may have. I saw one come through about machine translation. So, and what is it? for somebody that's new to the space. So what machine translation is using an external system. So Microsoft has a system called Cognitive Services. It's part of their artificial intelligence stack in the Azure platform that will automatically translate a, say, written message to, I think as of now, the library is up to 60 different languages. So it's auto translation, basically. So writing a, "Hi Stephanie, how are you today?" And in Brazilian Portuguese becomes "Bom dia, Stephanie." That's about the limit of my Portuguese for the day. But I hope that answers that question.
All right, so it looks like the next one, have you seen examples of safety policies be well communicated or poorly communicated to the first line?
You wanna take that one?
Oh gosh, I feel like I see all kinds, right? It's kind of like the file share conversation where everyone swears they have the worst file share you've ever seen, but really everybody's file share is a mess. I feel like it's a little bit that way where everybody might be able to do it a little bit better than they are. But there's, a big spectrum of like how well things are communicated out and how well they're handled. And, a lot of times that has to do as much with the training and the hands-on, like how much information has that person or that first line worker been provided in order to be comfortable in that space, to be able to go in, find the policies they need. Generally, like I said, it's kind of a big spectrum. The ones that are a little slower on the digital side, you do see the printing. Usually if you see something printed and hanging on the wall, there's always that risk of like, is it the most recent and how good is the policy behind going to check it, printing out the most recent policy and getting it up there. So, it's a people problem for the most part when those policies aren't communicated as well as they could. And we always, when we're working with our customers, try to help them with the people side of things and with the training and with the process as much as we do with giving them the technology so that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I've run into is, for companies that think they're moving to more digital communications, they'll say like, well, we send all our updates out electronically. And then we'll say, okay, great, what's your source of truth? And it's like, well, it's whatever was in the HR system when they enrolled. And they come to find out that maybe if they're lucky, 60 to 70% of the employee email addresses that are personal email addresses are accurate or good any longer. And so that reliancy on kind of the push into a personal email box can be both a good and a bad thing, right? The bad is that you really have to make sure that they're accurate. How are you tracking any compliancy measures that they signed off and read it? So in that case, sometimes physical forms outweigh, but with our solutions, I think both with what Stephanie has been able to produce using the M365 stack and our solution at LiveTiles called Reach, being able to have an app that flags as a mandatory must read, kind of creates that happy middle ground to where people are getting it and that they're signing off on it.
Yeah, we get a lot of that mandatory must read. That's a common request. We hear that a lot.
Let's see. Another question that has come in. Do you think access to mobile phones has played part in the shift for companies to consider first-line worker communications investments? So negating the need to make hardware investments. Absolutely, right? So whether it's some sort of company provided device or a BYOD device policy, but then making a technological investment to kind of put a secure, what they call bring your own device app, if you will, or security app on the phone to then allow only certain company approved apps to be loaded in a certain area. I've seen all kinds of different investment strategies in how companies are getting information, or investments in getting information out to their workers. Basically doing away with the idea of a kiosk, so not making those investments. Kiosk and desktops and, 3 or 4 kiosk centers and break rooms, but instead, giving maybe a small monthly stipend to be able to ask users to use their personal device. That's what I've seen. It's definitely anything else on.
Yeah, I mean, I still see a good mixture of that happening with the, bring your own device versus providing the devices. I think that things have come a long way. I think back in the day, no one wanted to use their mobile device for work because of well, what if my kids' pictures are removed when I leave this organization? What control do they have over my device? And, I think those are still valid concerns, but I think that there's a lot more we can do now to kind of pull back the content from the device without having to worry about the device as a whole. And
What
so, yeah, I think that enables a lot more.
there was no such thing as an unlimited data plan for $35 or something like that either. I mean, the other thing you got is you've got other regulations, because certain countries, you cannot ask your employees to use their personal device for work related. So absolutely, in those countries, they would much rather make investments in communication devices to be able to communicate than other hardware investments to be able to enable. They want to be able to go to a more mobile workforce. So,
Yeah.
all right, Stephanie, you get the last question. What blockers seen? What blockers have you seen overcome to companies investing in first-line worker tools and apps? Sorry, I misread.
Yeah. So one of the things that immediately comes to mind is I feel like at least early on, we were definitely getting resistance for having to log in to devices. It's too hard to log in. I don't remember my username. I don't remember my password. I only log in once a week, that sort of thing. I think now that we have pins available, so I just need to remember like a 6-digit code. Windows Hello, where it's where you put the device in front of your face, it recognizes who you are and it logs you in. Being able to switch devices quickly with something like Windows Hello without having to go through the process of logging in. And you remember how long it used to take to log into a laptop or a desktop, right? It's like forever. Those things are all happening really fast now. So I think the ability to have identity and be easy, when I say identity, is the login. If login is easy, I'm more likely to use it. I'm going to get in there under my own account, not under a shared account that I share with 10 other people. Those things are really helping us kind of very quickly get through things that were the initial just baseline blockers. Like, I'm not even going to use this because I don't know my username. We're beyond that now, so that we can kind of get to that next step. That's been a big one, I think. And the other big one is just, again, going back to that ease of communications, being able to add it in there, being able to add different types of media content, and having corporate push information out, but also having, plant managers. It's easy enough for them to push information out. They don't have to take half of their day to sit down and do communications work. So I think the combination of those things, just the ease of the app, the fact that we can target everything, it really kind of funnels all of that into a really easy to use device everybody's comfortable with. And that's really kind of moved those blockers out of the way for this.
Right. It has to be easy to use. The minute it even hints at the idea of being a burden, your first line workers they'll begin to reject it. Right. If it becomes like, I literally have to go in every day and do this, it becomes tiresome. Right. Typically, first line workers, they're on their feet all day. They're moving around. Last thing they want to do is strain their eyes after hours and read through a policy, a procedure on a daily basis. It needs to become an easy to use critical resource. And And one of those items too that, Stephanie, you mentioned is also not just the ability to use like Windows Hello or Face ID or Touch ID or whatever the mechanism is, but it's really with everything going to more of kind of a cloud setup, the ease of being able to log in using one of your pre-existing accounts is also critical. So yes, I already have an M365 account, but I've got this third-party communication app. Well, the good news is it's built on Microsoft, and Microsoft's done a lot of the plumbing that I can just say log in with my Microsoft account, and it'll never ask me again. It'll authenticate me through just like I do on Teams or anything else, or whether it's log in with Google or log in with Facebook. All of those become possibilities. So you've got kind of this one-click easy integration that, again, makes it easy to gain access to the information. So, all right, I think that wraps up the Q&A section. So just, we want to thank everybody for joining. We'll be sending this out. So you don't have to hurry up and jot down our contact information. Again, that was Stephanie Donahue with PAIT Group. And my name is John Wesley. Feel free to reach out to either of us if you're interested in learning more about Firstline Worker Solutions, or even getting a free trial of the LiveTiles Reach product. So Stephanie, thanks for being with me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Awesome. Well, everybody, be well, have a great day, and thanks for